Assalamu alaikum everyone. Inshallah, let's just give it a couple more minutes. I know we started a couple of minutes late, but just to let everyone join, let's just give it a few more minutes and then we'll get going. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Hope you're all well on the weekend. Um, Hope you've been enjoying the weather. It's nice for a change to have the sun out, so I hope you've been getting your steps in. Um, Inshallah, we're just going to get straight into the session. So it's a little bit different today. It's about wills, and of course, it's just good to have everything in place, as you never know what's going to happen with Hajj or just in general in your life. So of course, it's good to have it in place. And I'd like to pass it over to the expert himself, brother Harun, and inshallah, we can just take it from there. Brother Harun, take the stage.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay, Assalamu alaikum everyone. First of all, just bear with me one moment. I shall try to share my screen because I have a presentation to deliver. Um, Numbers wise, how are we doing on numbers? We've got about 60 odd people on this. Um,
Inshallah, maybe a couple more. Normally it's couples joining, but inshallah should be good
yeah.
enough.
So yeah, 60 join and perhaps double the amount. Okay. I'm just trying to share screen. Can we
I think it's been
allow-
accepted. You should be able to share it now.
Perfect. Okay, just bear with me one moment. Uh,
Perfect. Yeah, we can see your screen.
Perfect. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So first of all, my name is Harun Rashid. I'm a lawyer who prepares Islamic wills and have done for 25 years. I gave this presentation last year. It was a slightly different format, so it caught me slightly by surprise. But essentially, it's the preparation for Hajj, but my section is on Islamic wills. My background is I qualified as a lawyer 25 years ago, perhaps longer now, and I was doing wills and estate planning. So everything in that heading except the Islamic part. And one day I was sitting at my desk and thinking to myself, what's the point? Why have I educated myself if I'm not helping the deen? What can I do with my life? And I came across a handout that was given to me when I went to an Arabic class from Dr. Surti, may Allah have mercy on him. Um, and he gave me a handout on Islamic wills. He gave everybody a handout. And I looked around and realized that no one in the country was preparing Islamic wills. And I looked into it, and the very first Islamic will I wrote was my own. And cut long story short, I left the firm I was working for and set up I Will Solicitors and realized the importance of Islamic wills over the last 30 odd years, 25 odd years. So w the firm that I work for is a firm called I Will Solicitors. I set it up myself many years ago. Recently, it was acquired by a company called Wahed, who do financial investments, halal financial investments. And what we do is everything wills related. So tax efficient wills, probate, which is what happens after you pass away, trust planning, lifetime tax planning. We're regulated, step qualified. We offer Islamic training advice. My colleague is a Malana as well, and we work with ulama and muftis to make sure that the advice we give is as accurate and correct as possible. And we have decades of experience in so doing. So the usual format of these presentations is very much why should you have a will? And there's 8 reasons every Muslim needs to have an Islamic will. Now, I used to deliver these presentations before the Islamic part, and six or seven of the reasons are there. The only additional reason is a Sharia compliance. So why should a non-Muslim have a will? It's all there. Why should have a Muslim have a will? Everything applies, but on top of that, it's a Sharia. And the application of it is mind-blowing. What I've learned over the last 25, 30 years, in terms of the wisdom behind the inheritance, just shows that it could only come from Allah. So from Sharia duty to tax efficiency, the case of writing one today. So these are the eight reasons: Sharia compliance, tax, guardians, executors, trustees, asset protection, funeral, nasiyah, charity, and there's others, but I'm going to kind of go through them one by one. First of all, why is it important? Why is it even in your seminar before? Well, before you depart for Hajj. Now, I went to Hajj myself many years ago. It's probably over 20 years ago now. And one of the things you learn is you got to get your affairs in order before you leave, as far as practical. And the Prophet ﷺ said, it is a duty of every Muslim who has anything to bequeath not to let two nights pass without writing a will. So when I first came across Islamic wills, that's when I realized that actually this is quite important. You shouldn't let two nights pass. And the narrator of that hadith said, and I didn't let one night pass. So the point being is that it's a significance importance, but why is it so important? Well, we'll come to that in a bit. But more importantly, from a Sharia point of view, if we are ticking things off our list, then this is one of the things that we need to tick, provided you have the means. And everyone on this call, alhamdulillah, has the means because you're about to embark on a lifetime journey and inshallah, life-changing journey. There's another hadith that I came across during my studies and essentially, or during the work. When I first came across it, there's a sheikh in Birmingham called Sheikh Zahir, and I had to ask him to verify it because it sounds like one of these WhatsApp messages that if you forward to 50 of your contacts, you're guaranteed Jannah. So, and this says that it's the hadith is that a man may do good deeds for 70 years, 60 or 70 years, but if he acts unjustly when he leaves his last will and testament, the wickedness of his deed is sealed upon him and he enters the fire because of it. Conversely, a man or woman may do bad deeds for 60 or 70 years, but if they act unjustly in their last will and testament, or act justly in their last will and testament, the goodness of the deed is sealed upon them and they'll enter the garden because of it. Now, if you just pause to think for one moment, 60 or 70 years of good deeds. Find somebody who has 60 or 70 years of good deeds. That's one thing. That's difficult in itself. You might find someone who's got 60 or 70 years of bad deeds, but good deeds one is hard to come by. But it could come to nothing if you act unfairly in your last will. So how can it be something so important? What is it about the will that can nullify 70 years of prayers? And when I first came across that, the reason why had to ask the Sheikh to check it out and to make sure it was a sound hadith and I wasn't quoting anything that was weak or fabricated, and it's from Ahmad ibn Majah, is because it seemed too good to be true for me or too bad to be true. How could one act, me not dealing with my wealth in the right way or dealing with it the right way, salvage 60 or 70 years or jeopardize 60, 70 years? By the end of today, it'll be very easy for everyone to understand, inshallah. So I'm going to come back to that. But before I do that, actually, there's two slides that I've not got here, but which I'd normally give with regard to what the non-Muslims have said about inheritance and Islamic wills more particularly. So the chap called Professor Alfred Rumsey and Sir William McNaughton, they were the rulers, they were the elite, they were the aristocrats in India when there was lots of Muslims and the British were ruling India in the 19th century. And they studied the Sharia and they concluded that the Muslim law of inheritance is beyond doubt the most civilized system known to man. That was what they concluded. So when you look into the Sharia and when you look into who gets what and how it's all designed, you will come to that conclusion as well if you have some understanding. Because why will you come to that conclusion? Because it's from Allah. Yeah. And if it's from Allah, it's going to be the best system known to man. But independently, the non-Muslims who have researched it correctly also find out the same. And why is that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that many legal systems adopt an arbitrary system. So, for example, English law has got a fantastic system. It says do what you want. It has something called full testamentary freedom. It means in your will you can do whatever you want. Now, the reason why I say it's a fantastic system is because you can use that system to say, I want to follow the Sharia. The problem is that it's also quite idiotic. It's a bit like democracy. Maybe I'm not allowed to say this on these, yeah, because democracy is one stupid person's vote is the same as one intelligent person's vote. So the English law system is do what you want. I've had clients who've said to me that they want to leave everything to Jack and Jill. And I said, you've got no children. Who are Jack and Jill? They said they are our cats. And I wrote a will for some true story, Birmingham client, non-Muslim client, £300,000 estate, a house worth 200,000 along with cash, and it's bequested left after husband dies to wife, wife dies to husband, and thereafter to Jack and Jill. I thought it was son, nephew, niece, but it wasn't. It was their cats. So do as you please. Yeah. And I quite like cats, but I'm not that excessive. Yeah. But that's a problem with being able to do as you want. You can leave your brothers, sisters, parents out in favor of your cat. But then you have different systems, which are something called where you have zero testamentary freedom, the complete opposite, something called forced heirship, which is you must leave it in this particular manner. Now, the Sharia is the middle way and there's an element of forced heirship and testamentary freedom. The forced part is we have no choice in it. This is what's decreed. That is actually what we prepare, the will part. But in reality, when you talk about the wasiya, it's that discretionary part. So you shouldn't let two nights pass without dealing with your discretion. If you have an intention to leave to charity, don't let two nights pass. Write your will so that something is left to charity on your behalf. As for the compulsory shares, that's automatically applied. So this is the difference between a will and a wasiya. Strictly speaking, the will is what you can leave to whoever you wish, and the fixed part is so the will is the wasiya, the fixed part is the prescribed shares. So under Sharia, the will part, as I've mentioned, is your choice. You can do it as you please. Two-thirds is fixed. It must go to family. There's a forced obligation upon you. You might not like your son, you might not like your daughter, but if they're Muslim, Allah forbid, you might not like them, Allah forbid, but if they're Muslim, inshallah, then they are entitled. You can't write them out. One son may be a multimillionaire, the daughter may be poor, or vice versa. Once you pass away, their share is fixed. Why? Allah knows best, and we'll come to that later, inshallah. One third of your estate, however, you can leave to whoever you please. So, for example, if I have a son and a daughter, but also a very good friend, perhaps it's our care or someone else here, then I may wish to leave up to a third of my estate to them. But more significantly, in reality, use your one third to leave to charity, because that's one of the factors or one of the benefits, one of the things that will benefit you after you've passed away. This is the quote I had, actually, just got the slides in the wrong order. The Muslim law of inheritance compromises beyond question the most refined and elaborate system of rules for the devolution of property that is known to the civilized world. Can you imagine this? Someone, a professor who's a lecturer in Mohammedan law, as so they used to call it, in King's College University, he studied inheritance and concluded it's the best system known to man. And then the senior civil servant I quoted, in these provisions we find ample attention paid to the interests of all those whom nature places in the first rank of our affections, and indeed it is difficult to conceive any system containing rules more strictly just and equitable. Difficult to conceive any system containing rules more strictly just and equitable. And one of my colleagues, he's actually studied the Sharia in much more detail than I have, the fairness of it, the equity behind it, other jurisdictions, and he's reached the same conclusion. And I've reached the same conclusion. There is nothing that is more just and equitable. So the issue then that we'll get probably in the questions and answers is, well, what about this scenario? What about that scenario? We'll deal with all of that, inshallah. But essentially, it's the best system known to man. So what I find is quite helpful is just to review a few case studies because then you get a better understanding of who gets what and how sophisticated and how precise the Sharia is. When I was qualified as a lawyer, we used to use software packages and they used to always struggle with percentages. So 33.33%. So you got three kids, they get 33% each, but there's always something left over. But fractions don't. And in any hufaz amongst you will know that one of the most difficult verses, so hufaz tell me, to memorize is the first 10, 14 ayahs of Surah Nisa because it deals with quarters, halves, thirds, eighths, sixths, and it gets quite difficult to memorize because you can get easily get confused. Let's have the example of Zayd who passes away sadly. He was married to Amina. He has mother, father, and three children, two sons, one daughter. So the distribution if Zayd dies is everything is effectively dealt with is in 24 parts. 1/8 to Amina, which means she gets 3 out of 24. 4/24 or 1/6 to Khadija, 1/6 to Bakr, the father and mother. Father and mother get the same portion in this circumstance, and the children get the balance of 13/24 in 5 shares. Get two each, and daughters get one. So, sorry, just bear with me one moment. So that's the distribution, and there's a couple of different case studies. So that's the first case study where you have sons, daughters, then essentially wider siblings or any other family relative is blocked out. So as long as you have a son, then brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, etc., they're not going to inherit. The next case study is where you've just got two sons. And from that, you'll notice that very similar, but the sons get the balance. So the wife gets the same amount, parents get the same, and the sons get 54%, 13/24 roughly between them. Now, the reason why this third case study has been included is because this is exactly the same as this one. Parents, two kids, wife. Parents, two kids, wife. But notice a difference that the two children here are daughters. And because they're daughters, the way the Sharia distribution works, everything is in 27 shares. It's complicated. But in simple terms, the daughters get 59%. So where there's less male relatives to look after the daughters, they actually get a greater share. So a lot of people say, oh, but sons get twice your daughters. Look at this case study. The daughters actually get more compared to what the sons would have got. And then Amina leaves a husband and two daughters and a surviving husband. So with no parents surviving, and you've got daughters only, husband gets a quarter, the daughters get 4/12 each, and the brother then comes in as 1/12. That's because there's no son and there's no father. And that's where the male responsibility kicks in. I had this conversation with my son yesterday about male responsibilities. You are there to look after your wives, your children, your parents, and also sometimes your nephews and nieces. This is where Bakr's responsibility now comes over Iman and Sophia. Whether he chooses to do that or not is a different matter, and which we'll come to as well, inshallah. So I'm gonna just skip through slightly differently to the verses of inheritance. In fact, I'll go back actually. That's the Sharia reasons as to why you should have a will. First of all, it's from the Sunnah, Hadith Prophet ﷺ, you shouldn't let two nights pass without writing a will. Secondly, it's from Quran. The distribution is mentioned very precisely in Quran. And a lot of people say, it doesn't say in the Quran that you should pray 3 fards for Maghrib or 4 fard or 2 fards for Fajr or anything like that. It says pray. Why is inheritance defined so precisely? Because people argue over money. Yeah. If your next door neighbor's praying 4 fards for Maghrib, you're not going to care. You can say he's a bit strange, but that's about it. Yeah. But once your next door neighbor tries to take your money, then you're going to argue and take him to court on it. So this is why it's very defined in Quran, and the verses of inheritance are detailed, and we'll come to it a bit later. But I wanted to go through these 8 reasons actually. So we've done the Sharia compliance. Essentially, it's Sunnah of Prophet ﷺ. It's mentioned in Quran, and therefore we should do it. Simple as that. We shouldn't let 2 nights pass without writing a will. On top of that, you can write a will to save tax because the taxation rules in this country is that if subject to certain thresholds, 40% of your wealth can go to the taxman. So what we often say to a client who's got 2 kids, in reality, you've got three. Your son, Zaid, your daughter, Zainab, and the taxman. And the taxman gets more. You're worried about Zaid and Zainab, taxman gets more, you'll get 40%. So all else remain equal. If I've got £1 million estate, It could be that 400,000 goes to the government and 600,000 to my children. It's usually not that extreme, but I've written out checks for the tax man to well over hundreds of thousands of pounds, and sometimes seven, 800,000 pounds. And I'm sure our liabilities be more in millions sometimes, where there's been a lack of planning. So often they call it tax planning because you can arrange your affairs to mitigate inheritance tax. It's not perfect, but it's better than not leaving anything. So that's the second reason why you should have a will. And third reason you should have a will is guardianship. Now, guardianship is who looks after your children. Everyone's worried about their funds and trying to save tax, but what about your children? Now, one of the things that I've kind of, again, encountered throughout my career dealing with Islamic wills, it's amazing, but every single thing that's mentioned in one page of Surah Nisa is actually relevant to my subject matter of wills. Ignoring the tax, although there's an element of tax in there, everything else is with it, which I used to present about prior to doing Islamic wills, is included within the Sharia, but I just didn't know about it. So once I had a client to me and said, I'm going to leave guardians for my kids. Should I leave them something? Should I leave them some money? So I thought to myself, well, that's nice, kind gesture. I said, well, it's up to you. But what does the Sharia says? The Sharia says that if the guardian is well off, let him claim no remuneration. But if he's poor, then feed them out of the property, give them from the property. So the Sharia has actually got guidance as to not only who should be the guardian, although that's not fixed guidance, it's not obligatory, it's guidance, but also it's got guidance as to whether you should leave them something or not. And then executors and trustees. Now, what does the Sharia say about executors and trustees? Why should you write a will? Why is that one of the reasons? Well, one of the reasons is to appoint executors trustees is because you can use your will to name people who you'd want to deal with your estate. So either I can say my kids don't get on, but when I die, they're going to miraculously all get together and deal with my estate perfectly. Or I can name a trusted individual, law firm, accountancy practice, friend, another relative, or one child who everyone does respect to deal with the affairs. So why leave it to chance when you can actually write your will and say these are the people you'd want to deal with the estate? And Surah Nisa says something about that as well, which I'm going to come to. Protecting assets. Well, I had a will where somebody passed away and they left everything to their son. Problem was, son was going for a divorce and he was on benefits. One son was going for a divorce, the other son was going on benefits. So the son who was going for a divorce lost his money to his wife, and the son who was on benefits lost his benefits and until all his money was gone. And effectively, there's no protection of their assets. And there's other scenarios where the child is not capable or mentally immature and will just waste the money. So our wills use trust funds to protect assets. But the Sharia says something about asset protection. And then there's funeral wishes, which I'll come to, and nasiha and charity. But I'm going to fast forward slightly. So Surah Nisa, verses 1 to 14, taught me more about inheritance than my degree did, and that's no lie. So, ayah number 5 says, to those weak of understanding, make not, sorry, just accidentally clicked away. To those weak of understanding, make not over your property which Allah has made a means of support for you, but feed and clothe them with it, and speak to them words of kindness and justice. So, if you've got somebody very young or very old, don't give them the property to blow, but give them user property for their benefit. This is what we term asset protection. And ayah number 6, make trial of orphans until they reach the age of marriage. If you find sound judgment in them, release the property to them. So people used to say to me, trusts are not they're not Sharia compliant because the inheritor is entitled to the wealth immediately when someone dies. Yes and no. They are entitled to the wealth, but if they are of a young age, they can't manage it. So therefore, the executor, the trustee, should manage the wealth for the child and until the sound judgment. Um, and then ayah number 8, if at the time of division other relatives or orphans or poor are present, feed them out of the property and speak to them words of kindness and justice. One of the reasons why you should write a will is to leave to charity so that you have something that's ongoing after you pass away. And it's recommended in ayah number 8. Ayah number 9, executors and trustees. Let those disposing of an estate, the executors or trustees, have the same fear in their mind as they would have for their own if they'd left a helpless family behind. Those who unjustly eat up the property of orphans eat up a fire into their bodies. And that ayah is linked to my tax efficiency ayah because the commentators on that ayah have said that this is not restricted to individuals. So those who unjustly eat up the property of orphans eat up a fine to their bodies actually applies to government systems. So when the government taxes you 40% and your orphan child gets 60% or orphan children get 60% of the wealth and the government takes 40%, and that's excessive and unjust and it's used for all sorts of things that are disagreeable, then they're purchasing fire instead. And then ayahs 11 and 12 confirm who gets what. And interestingly, at the end of ayah 11, Allah directs as regards your children's inheritance, male portion equal to that of two females, etc. It says these are settled portions, subhanAllah, for parents. I think there might be a section missing there. But essentially, it says these are settled portions ordained by Allah. Allah is all knowing, all wise, after 11 and 12, or 11 or 12. And then, most importantly, ayah number 13 and 14, after inheritance has been introduced, after the verses have explained and everyone gets their share, it says, these are limits set by Allah. Those who obey Allah and His Messenger will be admitted to gardens with rivers overflowing beneath, and that is the supreme achievement. But those who disobey Allah and His Messenger and transgress His limits will be admitted to a fire to remain there, and they shall have a humiliating punishment. So let's just take a moment to pause on that. These are limits set by Allah. Those who obey Allah and His Messenger will be admitted to gardens with rivers flowing beneath. That is the supreme achievement. Immediately after inheritance, but those who disobey Allah and His Messenger and transgress His limits will be admitted to a fire to remain near, and they shall have a humiliating punishment. This is how important inheritance is. It's linked in to um, effectively heaven and hell. And I'm sure it'll come through in questions, but I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to make reference to that during the Q&A session. But who benefits from writing an Islamic will? So we've spoken about Islamic will. We've spoken, sorry, one other point actually. Slides all over the place just to make sure you're concentrating. Um, Funeral wishes. When we prepare our wills, they include a funeral wishes clause which says you'd like to have a Islamic burial, ghusl, kafan, and no MRI if at all, no post-mortem for all if at all possible. And we also include a nasiha clause, which is advice to family and friends. But on the funeral wishes, throughout my career, I've come across stories where Muslims have been cremated. And why has that happened? Well, the first Muslim doctor in Solihull was actually cremated because when he passed away, his friends and colleagues didn't know what to do, so they cremated him. And I had a story where there's a chap in Preston, and his mother wanted him buried, but his children were non-Muslim. They wanted him cremated. And the next of kin trumps everything, unless you've got funeral wishes clause and you've chosen the right executors who are going to follow your wishes. So that chap was cremated. I had one other story, very sad story, true story I was involved in, whereby convert Muslim, revert Muslim, his children were Hindu, his wife was Muslim, but it was a nikah only wife. And after he passed away, she wanted him buried, they wanted him burnt. And the compromise reached because the body was just in the hospital waiting for a release, and we tried to argue the case, and the children tried to argue the case, and there was no will. The conclusion that was reached was he had a ghusl, he had his prayed for him, but then the Muslim family had to hand him over to the non-Muslim Hindu children, who took him out of his coffin, put him in a suit, and he was cremated. And Allah knows best. So this is a true story, but you can effectively minimize the risk of that by having your funeral wishes recorded within your will. And I've had one recently last year whereby similar scenario, but we managed to persuade the coroner to provide for a burial to the Muslim child as opposed to cremation to the non-Muslim child. There it was at equal lengths, equal categories, but the coroner went with what he would have perceived as the Muslim's wish. And then charity, up to one third of your estate can be given and directed to charity as reduces inheritance tax and acts as a sadaqah jariyah for you. So essentially, who benefits from writing a will? So the person who benefits from writing a will, first and foremost, you do. Why? You've discharged your duty. You've fulfilled your obligation. Then your family benefit because they have clarity, they have fairness, there's prescribed shares. The sons, daughters shouldn't be arguing, why is it that you've got double and I've got half? Or why is it that mums gets a share or what why is wives share this? Because it's from Quran. Now, there's one story which I've come across in Birmingham family, whereby mum's got one foot with one son, one foot with the other. Father died. The elder son took the wealth. The younger son had nothing. They've argued about it for many years. And I tried to do a reconciliation. And the younger son, who had nothing, said, I want to take it to the grave with me. They refused the reconciliation. So it destroys families if it's not done correctly. And therefore, the community is destroyed because these two brothers, they don't go to the same masjid. They avoid each other at family functions. So essentially, by writing your will, you can avoid a community breakdown, and charities benefit because by writing a will, you can leave something to charity. If you don't write a will, if you have good children, good inheritors, they may leave something, but they may not. And also, why don't you get the credit for it by leaving something yourself? We often say to clients that if you're going to leave 100,000 to your son, then leave 99,000 and leave 1% to charity. That 1% is not going to make any difference to his life, but it may make a difference to your akhirah. And if charities are benefiting, then our brothers and sisters in Syria, Gaza, Palestine, Iran, wherever it may be, they will also benefit because of the work that the Muslim charities are doing. And you can also set up a waqf, which we'll come to perhaps later. And therefore, if charities are benefiting and we are leaving to worldwide good causes, the ummah is benefiting. So from one simple act of benefiting yourself, it has a worldwide impact, ummah impact. So where do we go from now here? This isn't a plug for I Will solicitors, by the way. It is in some ways, but it's not really. The main point being is before you embark upon this journey for lifetime, get your affairs in order. So you can s- sorry, your checklist. You've got your package of Al Hidayah. Obviously, yeah, I'm bound to say this, but Alhamdulillah, you're going to have one of the best packages out there, inshallah. And they'll look after you. You've paid your debts, settle any outstanding debts, make peace with family, prepare your will. I will solicit and guide you. If not, get your local Muslim solicitor who's experienced in wills to do it. Just get your will prepared. Leave something to charity. Set up a waqf which will continue long, long, long before you've passed away. Long, long, long after you've passed away. So this is what I put down as kind of my checklist before going to Hajj. Um, how do we do the Islamic will part? Well, you can scan the QR as part of this presentation or email us. You complete a will questionnaire. We arrange a no obligation meeting where we say, this is what you need, this is why you need it, this is how much it's going to cost. And then we prepare your will in 10 days. Now, Hajj is very soon, it's around the corner. Every year for the last 25 years, possibly the exception of COVID year, we get a Hajj rush. I'm going on a Hajj, brother, next week. Can you prepare my will? I'm going tomorrow. Can you prepare my will? We're lawyers, we're not magicians. Yeah. So, with that in mind, the we'll come to questions in a bit, but with that in mind, inshallah, the sooner you act, the better. And then once it's signed, sealed, and witnessed, done. So I think I've kind of spoken for long enough. There's a lot more, but I'm sure that'll come out within the presentation. So I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to take questions now.
Khair, Brother Harun, for that very informative presentation. And like you said, inshallah, let's go through some questions now. If anyone wants to say it live, inshallah, just raise your hand and we'll get through them. Um, Brother Umar asked, how long is the will valid for? Does it need to be renewed?
Good question. The will is valid forever, but there are certain facts that will and circumstances which will naturally want you to review it. So if I prepare my last will today and leave everything to my one son, but then he dies, obviously I need to renew my will. Sometimes the law changes, sometimes circumstance changes. And one interesting thing that a lot of people miss out is if you marry. If you marry, your will is automatically revoked. So we recommend a renewal a revisit, looking at your will every few years, bearing in mind that you should keep your will beside you. It's yeah, every few years is not too onerous. Personally, I look at my will every Ramadan. Do my zakat calculation, look at my will, list my debts, etc., and then move on. Add any nasiha to family and friends, move on. Um, shall I just whiz through the questions or?
It's up to you. I think someone's raised their hand. So Nashir, if you want to ask your question live, just inshallah you're unmuted.
Assalamu alaikum. Just wanted to ask you about more around the taxation bit. So if you did write a will, do you still have to, in your will, do you have to write how the tax that you're going to pay and all that kind of stuff?
Uh, no, we kind of the way the wills work is that your estate is divided after debts, funeral expenses, and any taxes
Oh, okay.
your inheritors get. So whether you write it or not, the taxman's going to take his share.
Okay. Okay.
No
Cool.
problem.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Are there any cost to making changes to your will?
Um, One of my favorite questions. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm a lawyer, not a charity worker. Yeah. So uh, l- there is a cost to making a change to your will because there's a time involvement. So anyone who says we won't charge you or anything, they're offering you an unlimited service to eat as much as you want for a fixed price. It doesn't work like that. So yes, there is. Sometimes usually when someone prepares a will out of the last 100 wills we've prepared, in the next 5 years, maybe 4 or 5 people will say we want to revisit it. And of that, maybe 3 or 4 will charge, and 1 or 2 will say there's no charge because there's nothing to do. So it's not a regular ongoing expense, but it is something that needs a bit of investment. And the way I look at it is the cost of not doing it is much greater than the cost of doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Brother Bilal, you have a question? You're unmuted.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Harun. Thank you so much. It was very educational. I have a question around the tax. Basically, from what I understand, is the law is changing either next year or the year after that, where your trust will include your any pensions that you've amassed. Can you elaborate on that for me, please?
Yeah, I can. It's not quite correct. The law is changing from 6 April 2027, whereby previously your pension fund was exempt from inheritance tax. Now they want a slice of your pension fund as well. So it's not that your trust or anything like that. So your pension monies will be taxable. So I had a non-Muslim client of mine passed away with a pension fund of 1.3 million. That's passed to his wife and kids tax free. But if he had died 2 years later, then there'd been a 40% tax hit on that. And the legislation isn't clear as to how they're going to implement that, but it's taxable.
So can I ask a follow-on question? If if we have our will in place before that legislation change,
Nice try,
does
but
it make a difference? Yeah, no, it doesn't. Okay, thank you. Jazakallah.
no fake.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. Another question. When a wife writes her will, for example, it's the wife, husband, 3 sons, and the wife passes away, but she has parents. Do they have
That's what
to
I
be
thought.
included
Yeah.
in the will, or does the will only consider husband and children?
I'm not sure whether the husband's
I'm
written
on
the
mute now.
question or the wife has, yeah. But in terms of the answer to the question is that if a wife writes her will, it's her parents, her husband, and 3 sons will all be entitled. So the parents will get 6 each, a third between them. Husband gets a quarter, and the balance is shared between the 3 sons. Just one question. Does this also contain the LPA? LPA is a lasting power of attorney. It's nothing to do with will. It's a document which deals with your affairs if you lose capacity. So it's separate from the will, but we can prepare that.
So, yeah. There's a question. With modern times, there are more circumstances where women are earning more, but also taking care of the parents. Can you then increase to the daughter's share?
Yeah, very good question. It doesn't surprise me at all. No. Yeah. And I'm glad the question's been asked because it's a reasonable question to ask. The position is that the way to look at our wealth is it's an amana that's given to us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the things that I may as well mention it now is that the 60 or 70 years, the hadith I mentioned about 60, 70 years, good deeds, bad deeds, essentially, what I've narrowed it down to is we now have 2 choices. Allah's will or your will? Allah's will or your will? And this is what I say to some of my clients who I'm advising. Sometimes it does seem unfair that your daughter, and I know daughters are fantastic and sons are a pain in the neck. Your daughter's looked after you, she spent money on you, your son's going to get double inheritance and probably visits you once every now and again on Eid or whatever. It doesn't change your position on death. However, during lifetime, as a parent or as somebody, any individual can make whatever gift they wish. So if my daughter's very nice to me or very good to me, then I can leave her a house. I can leave her more. I can give her a house or money as a reward for that, because that's not a gift where it's a need gift that has to be equal. This is because you're caring for me. I'm going to buy you a car. I'm going to buy you a house, etc. That's fine. But on death, it's no longer my property. I had the amana, and on death, it's my job to pass it on. So understand the circumstance, but it doesn't change your position. And also the verse of inheritance, one of the first the very first ayah of Surah Nisa ends by saying Allah watches over you. So Allah knew you'd be here today. Allah invited you to Hajj this year, inshallah. And Allah knows whether women are going to be looking after their parents or not. But these verses were written and prescribed for a reason.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Harun. Another question. Salam, what if you have a child from a previous marriage, not of mature age? Is the child entitled?
Yes, if they're your child, they're entitled, as long as they're Muslim.
Okay. How do I set up my will? I have two sons from a previous marriage, have always lived with the mother, and in the second marriage, my husband, I have a daughter and a son.
Yeah. So one of the other questions early on is, do you provide the service set up wills and trusts? If so, how can we get in touch? So the trust part is where we do this, where you've got what they call blended families, or if you've got children from previous relationships, and we prepare the will whereby if you've got children from previous relationship and current relationship, they're all entitled as long as they're Muslim. So we prepare a will usually with a trust structure which says when I pass away, for example, I appoint my friends A, B, and C. Their job is to divide my inheritance amongst my children in the Sharia provisions. So they've got the flexibility to consider the circumstances. If my son's not well or ill or divorcing, they might hold back his wealth and his inheritance and give it to him when it's safe to do so. So essentially, it's we cater for that, and it's not uncommon, so it's not an issue. I'm just trying to whiz through the questions.
Perfect. Jazakallah khair. Salam, my wife and I are married. We have no children. If my wife passes away, my wife's parents have passed away, and she has only one living sister. Will her living sister inherit from my wife's estate?
Yes. So the living sister will, the husband will get a half. The living sister will get. This is where my I get a little bit rusty, where it's outside the children and grandchildren. The living sister potentially gets up to half as well, but I need to double check that. But they
Jazakallah khair.
definitely inherit.
Okay, I think any more questions? Anyone want to ask anything live? I think we pretty much went through
I've got a
everything.
few. I think you might have missed. I've got, or maybe I've got it
You
here. If
you,
you have
you may as well
adopted
go through it, yeah.
Okay. If you have adopted children via nursing, do they inherit as your own children? Not as far as I'm aware, it's your natural children that inherit. Adopted children can inherit from the wasiha. This is where the Sharia gives you that flexibility. So if you have, in my father's case, he had five children and seven children, in my mother's case, rather. Uh, my father's first wife died when my sisters were young, but my mum's prepared her will so that her wasiya says, leave to the younger two children as much as their sisters would have received, their natural sisters. So essentially, the stepchildren can benefit, or adopted children can benefit from the wasiha. Um, where can we find your firm details, or can you share a link? Yeah, it's www. I'll share it on here, I think. But you can Google
Inshallah,
it.
we'll try to do it in the groups as well. So after the webinar is over,
Yeah,
inshallah, we can get your details. We can put everything there.
yeah, fine. And then in terms of any other reputable firms to be shared, that's there are no one. No, Alhamdulillah, there's in reality, there's not many firms out there who specialize in this area, but and then genuinely, I can't recommend many, but if you do your research, I'm sure you'll find somebody, inshallah.
Okay, I
Um,
think Bilal has his hand raised again. If you have another question, inshallah, you can go ahead and ask it now.
on your mute.
Jazakallah. Sorry, just two questions, inshallah. First question, can you cover what the difference is between UK spousal law and and how that fits in with Sharia law? And also, my follow-on question is just thinking about what you said a bit earlier about the inheritance tax, the tax above the fund, above the sort of limit that you have. And there's a 7-year gifting rule, which I don't quite understand what that is. If you could just, inshallah, just cover that as well for me, please.
Yeah. Um, in simple terms, the 7-year gifting rule is there's almost a Sharia equivalent, but I'll come back to that. The 7-year gifting rule is if I'm worth £5 million, I'm going to die tomorrow. The easy thing to do is give all my wealth to my family today and then die tomorrow. But the government says, no, 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 that's too easy. They're going to look back 7 years and any gift I've made, that becomes taxable as well. So that £5 million gift is still taxable. So that's why they say plan early. So make your gifts before you pass away. But obviously, you got to know when you're going to die. No one knows that. But generally, the younger you are, the more likely you are to survive 7 years. As for the spousal and the like, what I'd suggest is just email in because I don't want this to kind of turn into a tax and trust seminar more on the Sharia side. Just one other question on that, if that's okay. One other question, if both parents passed away, who might be the guardian of children in terms of Sharia? So we've spoken to a mufti on this in some detail. There is an order. It depends on whether they're boys, girls, the ages, etc. But from a Sharia point of view, it's best to choose the most appropriate person. So if the most appropriate person, or if the right is with my brother, but he happens to be alcoholic, then I've got no duty to appoint the alcoholic brother. Or if my brother lives in Australia, I've got no duty to appoint him because it's just not practical. So choose who you feels appropriate, and we can write that in within your will. Um, in terms of what's the cost of preparing the wills via us guys? Depends on the type of will. We generally say it costs more not to prepare the will than it does to prepare it, but we prepare wills in three categories: simple, intermediate, complex. Simple 500, intermediate 1,000, complex 2,000, give or take. It all depends on your personal circumstances, what's required, how much detail, and that's why our first meeting is no obligation. Uh, Islam, I'm resident overseas. Would a UK will be valid here? Would I need local will as well? Both countries are common law. What we normally recommend is where your assets are and where your domicile is, that's where you should have your will. So if I've got assets in England and I'm domiciled in England, I have a UK will. But if I've got property in Germany, I have a will in Germany. If I've got property in Emirates, I have a will in Emirates. Um, Again, the question, what happens if a mother fed an adopted child? I actually don't know the answer to that. My understanding is that because it's not a natural child, that child won't inherit, but you can leave from the wasiya. But I would need to check that with a mufti, so I don't want to kind of give that as a definite answer. If a will is made in private, how are people made aware when someone has passed? Uh, Good question. It's a practical aspect. Generally, I've done presentations on wills for the last 20 years. I've always made reference to updating my will. I've said to my family, it's in the filing cabinet. My wife looks after the filing cabinet more than she does me. So the point being is let people know. Usually the law firm has it. Sometimes we get a request saying, so and so has passed away. We heard they had their will prepared by you. But if it's that private that no one knows about it, then there's a risk that no one finds out about it. So you should make your executors or your family know about it. And nowadays with electronic copies, you can save it, but it has to be the original paper copy should ideally be kept because otherwise you get difficulties in implementing it post death.
Khair, Brother Harun. I think you went through every every single question here. If anyone has any other questions, inshallah, just before we wrap up, feel free just to ask it, raise your hand. If not, inshallah, we'll call it a day.
Back now. One thing I will say, just whilst anyone might type um the the question, type in any final questions, is that essentially and I remember when I went to Hajj, it wasn't long ago, it was 30 years ago, or 20 years ago. But the point being is that get your affairs in order. It's very important. And as far as the will is concerned, you've got that opportunity to leave to charity. You've got an opportunity to leave something that will continue many, many years ago. Now, most of you are kind of going on the Hajj, and well, I say most of you. When I went on Hajj, there's a part of me that thought, I just want to die there. Yeah, do my Hajj, die so that I'm, sinless, as it were. Inshallah, all of you will come back, but it doesn't always happen. But have that will, don't leave a mess behind. And that 60 or 70 years, Hadith, is because you're effectively accepting Allah's will. As I said, it's your will or Allah's will. I've had situations, I had one example, final example I'll give, whereby sister came to me, who was in Manchester many years ago, and she said, my husband beats me out, very abusive. I've put up with it for 20 years. I'm not going to leave him. Do I have to leave him a share? And I said, his entitlement is a quarter because she had a son gets three quarters. She says, where does it say that? It says in Quran. She said, give him his share. She didn't hesitate. She said, give him his share in her will. Inshallah, she's still alive and inshallah, her situation's improved. But the point being is that zero hesitation of following Allah's will. Why should she not expect Jannah? And conversely, you have the others who have got wealth galore and they treat it as their wealth. No, but I've worked hard for it. And therefore, I want to leave it to my daughter or my son or to whoever I want. And these laws are old and tales of the ancient, as they say, but it's not. Allah knows, and there's a reason and wisdom behind it. Final couple questions. That was my final remarks. Also, please pray for me. I pray you all have an accepted Hajj, and whether you get in touch with IELTS or not makes no difference. Just get your will done. How to distribute gold assets when would we need to get this valued by the jewelers? Yes, unless the children or family agree. Anything that's agreed is Sharia. So if the sons voluntarily give up to the daughters, or they say to the sisters, "Yep, you can have the jewelry," or you can choose first, that's all completely fine. If there's disputes and arguments, or you want to be, then get it valued and just pick from value or many ways to arrange it. Will we get a copy of this presentation, something similar like the Umrah guide we received? I don't know. Yeah.
Inshallah, we speak to Brother Harun about that one there.
Oh, the presentation I don't mind sharing. I mean, in terms of the videos, I don't know whether it's been recorded or what.
Yeah, inshallah, if anyone wants to get in contact with Brother Harun, we'll put all his details in every group. So feel free just to reach out to him directly, inshallah.
Channel. Okay.
I think that's it, everyone. So Jazakallah khair for attending. Jazakallah khair, Brother Harun, for that presentation. And like I said, the information will be shared into the groups. So if you want to reach out, inshallah, you can go ahead and do that. But it's coming up to 8 o'clock now, so inshallah we'll wrap it up. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for attending. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.